Hello, everybody. Hello and welcome. So today we're going to do just kind of a casual roundtable discussion about something that some of us have noticed. I'm sure you've noticed it too, America. You weren't in when we were doing a little bit of our early pre-stream conversation. What we're talking about today is progressivism and the problem with never anything being able to be considered a win, and then the problems with having criticism of that and how you kind of get pigeonholed in. Tim, you have a great example of this. And before we get started, with me as always is Wizard of Cause, Nick, my partner in crime. We have Sage, aka Tim, and we have Some Dumb American.
Hello all.
Okay.
Hi guys.
And everybody's links are in the description below. But Tim, start us off.
Yes, there was two things actually that kind of got me thinking about this. One of them was a tweet the other day from someone who simply could not understand how the whole concept of pedo acceptance could even be a thing that was being discussed. While it is so evil, I believe was the term, that how can someone even think about even discussing this as a basic point? And my argument is that how could it never not become a point? And this is where I'm going to sound a little bit crazy, and I beg you all to bear with me for just a second.
It's a good point, though.
The second, and this is where I'm going to sound crazy. Bear with me. The second gay rights became accepted, the pedo rights discussion was an inevitability.
It was put on the table as soon as it was a win.
Again, this is something where I will say right off the bat, just before anyone starts discussing it, even though I consider it to be true, I consider it absolutely to be worth it as well. But my point that I want to make is that most of those who are discussing, well, they're discussing social justice today. It was social rights or equal rights or whatever you want to call it in the olden days, are what you would call progressives, and not necessarily the kind of political progressives that are basically code words for leftists. I mean, people who are trying to progress society towards a new thing.
Right.
A better thing, mostly, but in their minds at least, always a better thing. However, that also means that they can never stand still. Sargon had a little bit of a video about it once, but if any of you watch that, you will know what I mean when I say they can never be still. They must always go on to the next thing. They must always, progress. It's in the name. Once the gay rights thing was won, there was no sitting still and waiting for sort of the...
What's the next big inequality we need to focus on?
But now we can rest on our laurels. No, we have to move on to the next thing. The next thing in this case was mostly transgender rights. Am I volume low? That's probably because I'm on my iPad, because my microphone is dead on my computer. I'm very sorry, chat. I hope, audience, I hope it can be heard anyway. My point is, the next thing they moved on to was then transgender rights. Again, valued, positive thing. Happy that in the end it succeeded. But it was at the same time, of course, at this point that, shall we say, social justice started to take over from...
Political progressivism. But I mean, because if you consider a person like Gary Edwards, he considers himself a progressive, but I would in no way ever consider calling him an SJW.
Exactly. What you can say is that social justice became a dominant feature or at least a more dominant feature in society, and a lot of them became progressives, or a lot of them were progressives. As you say, certainly not all progressives are social justice activists, but it does tend to be that social justice activists does seem to be progressives in a certain way, shape, or fashion. So when that came in, they had to move on again, and now the transgender fight is also one, mostly. I mean, there is still mop-up actions, but as a general rule, it seems like overall, societally wise, transgender rights have mostly been won. However, of course, there is the thing: should 76 genders, 2 genders, ever many genders, but I don't think there's any real sort of fight left over whether anyone should be disallowed from doing whatever just because they are transgender.
One of the reasons why I was really excited to bring Sometime American into this, she and I have had this conversation a few times because you're still in college, right? You're on break over the summer?
Yeah, I'm on break over the summer right now.
Okay, and we've touched on this before. Like the ultra progressive academia are not interested in things actually being won because it does not serve them for those things to be accomplished. Because if they get accomplished, then they don't have a job anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what's Anita Sarkeesian going to do if her goals are met? Then there's nothing for her to complain about.
Right.
There's always got to be something. I mean, and I'm guessing that this was brought on, that you guys started talking about this because of the Doctor Who situation.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that one next.
Where they're saying things along the lines of, "This is a win, but it's not to win enough." Yeah.
Exactly, and that was actually, sorry, I'm interrupting. You keep talking.
No, it's okay. I was done. Go ahead.
And yes, chat, my accent is very much Danish. Doctor Who was the next thing. My point that I just wanted to finish was that after transgender rights, it was the next thing, and there could have been several possibilities. In this case, pedo rights seem to be the next sort of fight for equality or whatever. And my point is, because of this force of progressivism always keep moving, that it would end up there is, in my opinion, inevitable. And then we come to exactly the whole thing with Doctor Who, and particularly the Anita Sarkeesian tweet storm she did a couple of days ago.
Well, if I can add,
because someone made fun of her for the whole, and a lot of us I made fun of the whole thing, not with her necessarily, but with the whole thing. Okay, now they have a woman. Why not a transgender, black, midget, lesbian, paraplegic?
Just all bases covered.
Yeah, no. But my point is, and that I wanted to say, what I feel, and this is why I asked for this roundtable discussion, is that yes, it's a joke, and yes, it should be made fun of, but I don't feel we're taking it seriously enough as a kind of overall societal force currently being overtaken by social justice, because they will go there and they will keep fighting. Every time we give in, and I'm not saying we shouldn't compromise, I'm not saying we shouldn't give up the fight if our opponents have a good cause, but every time we give up, they will never accept it as just a win. They will always use it as a springboard for another thing. What I basically wanted to have this discussion about is we need to take this seriously. Yeah, it's a joke, but it's a joke in a way that it will come back to hurt us if we totally forget about it.
What were you think, Nick?
Well, I mean, it was interesting because before we got in here, Tim, you made the comparison saying, we're going to end up sounding like, 80s era evangelicals. Truth be told, though, it was a joke. No, I see what you're saying, but actually, there was an interesting sort of perspective offered there, because I've been noting and comparing social justice to especially the 80s evangelical types for a while, specifically because within each of these issues that this new extremist ideology or faction picks up, each one of them, they are nothing more than vehicles to obtain further power. It has nothing to do with the rights of people, or when they want to shame you for disrespecting the disenfranchised and so on and so forth. What it keeps coming back to is that they consistently need to find a new windmill to tilt at, specifically so they can remain relevant and insist on more power. And you've seen this. I mean, and the sad thing, one of the saddest things I've found, and be it Black Lives Matter or really any social justice faction, be it the transgender defenders or whoever you might want to choose, there are always, and this is true in almost any argument, there are always grains of truth or strands of logic which are sound, buried somewhere beneath the bullshit. And if you take Black Lives Matter, for instance, or even this pedo apologia, and this will sound like a bit of devil's advocate, and it kind of is, there are conversations that need to be held. It's very serious, very complicated conversations about everything from, when it comes to the Black Lives Matter, the actual state of Black America, how it got there, and what can be done to remedy it. And likewise, when it comes, for instance, to pedophilia. And I remember this was raised to me years ago in college by a friend of mine who just liked to think in these sorts of abstract, challenging terms. And one thing we found was, especially, we were both studying social or criminal justice at the time, right? Lots of aspiring cops, lots of them had these crusades they were on. And one of the most popular ones is everyone wanted to go out and bust pedophiles because they are, it's easy and right and pretty much correct to view them as the most vile sort of abusers out there. Mm-hmm. They prey on the most innocent victims possible. With that, though, almost playing devil's advocate, but he made a good point that stuck with me, is that with this sort of militant demonization, and it's completely warranted, and I take part in it myself, and I feel no shame for doing such. It does make actual sorts of conversations about the sorts of, talking about, okay, if this person is really this fucked up due to trauma or whatever it might be, the more they're pushed into the dark, as it was, the more that shit will fester, and then they will act out. Now, if they can actually, address it and make a point of staying away from children, which they ought to, and maybe go through some kind of therapies, that could potentially make understanding the issue itself a bit easier. But instead of going that direction, what we end up with is, it's everything from, we need to be compassionate to, it's just another sexuality, and we should talk about like making it socially acceptable. And so they're taking these things, and it's almost like they're just infusing them with jet fuel and bringing them to their worst, most extreme conclusions, and making any actual discussion about anything utterly impossible in the course.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And that's bait. Sorry, yeah, go.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna to follow up though. I mean, when you think on it though, that really does play nicely with the playbook, specifically because if no real discussion and no defined answer and no actual progress can be made, then the fight for progress never has to end.
True. But at the same time, this is dumb American.
Sorry. I was just going to say, which, it keeps them employed. It keeps the base of academia growing, because I've seen some people ask, and I'm sure you guys have heard this too, if you go into gender studies in college or you study sociology, what do you do? What you do is you become an academic, and you talk about these things, you write papers, you write books, you give talks, and that's what these people perpetually do, or they go into some sort of community work, and which is especially easy now that the internet is a thing. It's incredibly easy to become part of Vogue or to become part of MTV and stuff like that. So there's a lot that these people can do just in the activism realm of things.
And I think there was also the interesting part too. The thing that drives me nuts about this is, the progressivism paints itself as a reaction to an inequality. And I don't necessarily think that's a very accurate way to be looking at how progressivism actually views these problems in society. I think at this point they see them. They don't see them as something that they're reacting to or correcting for. It's something that is instead a step ladder for them. I don't think it's really perceived as a great injustice, not with the people who do peddle this in colleges, who do direct the papers that are being published on websites, or the stories that will be run, or the TV shows that will be made in popular culture. This is a stepping stone. This is effectively them utilizing this for gain. And one of the problems that we have with it is when you then react to, when you then are trying to counter this or have criticism for it, it was like another thing that you said to me, Tim, which is you inevitably get painted as conservative, whether you're actually conservative or not, because again, it's never quite enough. And if you're on board with 90% of it, but then you're not on board for the last 10% of it, then you're a bigot, you know. And I just, it's so frustrating to me.
Well, you asked, I mean, it was asked earlier what the next step will be. You know, it was a joke, but I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if the otherkin, like if they just dive straight into Tumblrisms, just otherkin, headmates, that kind of shit. As silly as it is. Well, here, look already. I mean, we've gotten to a point now. We've gotten to a point where it's intellectually credible to say gender doesn't exist, and there's 40 of them or something like that. And so how is it really that big a leap to think that, you know, defending the rights of people who think that they're blades of grass and badgers, you know, that's how they identify, and you need to stop oppressing them, right? Well, it makes sense to me.
Well, what's going to end up happening, I think, is that the born this way argument is a slippery slope that we are quickly falling down in a massive mudslide of bullshit. Because when we started talking about gay rights, it was always, you know, well, they're born this way and they can't help it. Where in retrospect, maybe we should have been making the argument, it's two adults, none of your business. It doesn't matter if it's a choice or not.
Right.
Probably.
Right.
Because now you can say, oh, well, pedophiles are just born this way. Oh, well, she was just born wanting short blue hair. So it's, you know, it's totally valid to say that that's a new gender. I think the born this way argument, because it was the main argument, is going to be used for everything down the line, including pedophilia, including, oh, by the way, I'm a dragon horse.
Yeah.
Because that became the accepted thing. They're born this way, so they can't help it. Whereas I think we probably should have been saying, it's two adults. Where they stick their dicks is none of your business.
Right.
True. There is one thing that... Sorry, Nick.
Oh no, I mean, it's, you know, with that though, I mean, it's so there's so much focus on the born this way thing that nobody actually takes the time to just acknowledge is this way, right? And it becomes such a question of like denying someone's nature that when you can, I mean, just look at the sheer levels of mental illness within the trans LGBTQIA plus community. It's just like the argument of trenders versus genders, right? It's doing a disservice to people who are genuinely going this way or that, when there are also people who are suddenly discovering that they're transgender after all these years. They're suddenly transgender and there are all these other things. And then that just happens to coincide with what are oftentimes an obvious series of mental breakdowns and outlandish behavior that would never be justified from anyone else. But because they're trans, it's not that they're mentally ill, it's that pressure in society is just so rotten to them that they act out.
Right.
Yeah, true enough. I mean, actually, Jeff had a point a little while ago that I wanted to touch upon. It's a bit away from where we are now, but he said, he said that I said, and it's true, that we are in a threat of becoming seen as conservatives. I actually consider it, to be perfectly honest, much worse than that. I consider the fact that most of us, in fact, have become conservatives. Conservatives, but in a sort of, we are constantly, because progressive SJWs are always pushing the envelope, we are always playing catch-up. We are always fighting a rear guard against the latest idiocy, while they are constantly ahead of the bell curve trying to push said idiocy. That Absolutely. Is basically why we are losing.
I say regularly.
Cannot fight it.
Yeah, I say it regularly that you know, in terms of and you know, I you know, as you know, I came out of the professional left. And by and large, none of my positions on matters have changed. It's not so much that I've become more conservative. It's that the ground beneath my feet has been moved for me. And now I find myself in this place where some people are even regarding positions that I hold as center-right, not because they are in any conventional sense conservative or you know, anti-liberal or anti-progressive or anything like that, but simply because the space between the middle and what we consider the left is just been pushed so far out that that anything that being remotely sensible in many regards plunks you right into the center or into the right or into the center left or something like that.
Well, as somebody who is, I would describe myself as a conservative, and not because I'm a displaced liberal. It's interesting that, you know, a number of years ago, people who do consider themselves liberals, who are now in the boat of being left behind by the regressive left, whatever you want to call them, like, we now get along great and agree on all sorts of stuff. Whereas a couple of years ago, we would have been arguing like crazy, because it just has gone that far to the left, to where you've pushed so many people who are liberals and who do consider themselves to be left wing. You just push them into the right with almost no place to go.
It's been rushing this way for a while, and it was funny watching this growth evolve from the perspective that I did, because it was already in academia. It had been festering there for a while. The growths within the media world had been something that was slow growth at first, but then really ramped up, especially as I'm starting to think that a lot of these humanities and gender studies and basket weaving instructors were pushing a lot of their, acolyte students. I don't even like the word students, because they're just acolytes, to go into media studies and so on and so forth. And then when you found a bunch of them in the activism world, it was funny because you could be in something like a labor organizing campaign, which for the longest time was the backbone of the real liberal movement. And all of a sudden you find yourself awash in these organizers who are openly and flat out saying, I have no interest in labor or labor politics. I'm just using this to build my resume so I can go fight for the rights of transgender people. And it seems to, it worms its way through everything it can get into, and then it corrupts it from the inside out. Because, they always said, the best way to change the system is from the inside. I think a lot of people took that advice to heart, went into these disciplines, got themselves into positions of power, used the same shaming techniques that are used against everyone in public anyway to make sure that they got their way, and have established a new status quo, which is, in effect, abide by my ideological precepts, or I will have you labeled forever as a hateful bigot, which, as we know, is the worst thing you can be.
Right. What's interesting about that is that even though it's the status quo, and even though it's popular, especially in popular culture and academia, it's not what's actually popular amongst the populace. And I think the easiest way to see that is with the Marvel comics, where they've started injecting social justice stuff into everything. And now they're not selling comic books. And so even though that's the standard of the industry, it's not the standard of their base, of their readers. Their readers don't care. They just want good stories. But the industry is so far removed from the actual readers and their actual audience. It's incredible to see that happen, because it's not a good business strategy to not give your readers what they want.
I've got a great example, actually, too. I want to share this with you guys. This is amazing. And I absolutely agree with you. I think you're 100% on point with that. Check this shit out. If you want another really clear example that this progressivism is by no means reflective of the larger audience in society, well, let's just take a look at this. Bill Nye Saves the World, 3.3 out of 10 rating on IMDb out of 5,070 votes. That's not just a bunch of hateful, misogynist, transphobic, sexist bigots that are voting on that. Of
course it is, Jeff. What are you talking about?
Fucking hell. So, I mean, that whole thing is just absolutely insane. You can see evidence that this is not indicative of the public consciousness. This is isolated, small, special interest groups that have politicized this.
Right, and they're so powerful that companies like Disney, who should be they're evil. Their only goal is profit, are somehow doing things that are causing them to lose readers. I mean, that's how scared people are of being called racist or being called a bigot or breaking the Hollywood status quo. It's crazy.
Well, on a quick note, and I mean, and I'm really just looking for clarification here. I thought Disney only really own Marvel Studios, not necessarily the comics themselves.
They own the whole shebang.
They own the whole shebang.
Well,
yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, has anyone else here read Robert Greene?
Chad has a good point. Did anyone notice that the sex junk episode is the one nominated for an Emmy?
Yes, we noticed that. Yeah, that's. I mean, the Emmys are all about bribery. I mean, that's been established for years.
But beyond that, take into consideration, like, you know, social justice as an ideology has, with every single award show, launched a shame and bullying campaign against it. Oscar is so white. It's, you know, and so on and so forth. I mean, we can go back to the sad puppies if we want. And I mean, has anybody else here read Robert Greene? 48 Laws of Power?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, brilliant book. Definitely recommend it if you haven't read it. And it's a really easy, it's a fun read, and it's enlightening as all hell. But throughout these, like, 48 lessons that he has to offer, a good handful always ultimately come back to always present yourself to your adversaries as being bigger than you are. And I made a joke in a chat string a few like weeks or a couple weeks ago or something, saying about how there's a story of there's a small force that is trying to take an unattainable city, and they have to cross down out of these mountains, and their forces have dwindled so small that they don't stand a chance at it. So they wait until night, and then they strap torches to the horns of each of their oxen, and they lead them down the mountain towards the camp. And in the night, what the defenders saw was what looked like an overwhelming force that they couldn't stand up against, and they fled the city. This is effectively, it's paper tiger politics is what we're dealing with here. These people, they use the emotional manipulation of shaming and bullying tactics in lieu of an argument. And then at the same time, they consistently present it as though it's the great majority. And just to get back to, like you said in the beginning, Tim, if we want to make comparisons to, you know, the evangelical right, for instance, this was part of their tactics, especially, you know, during the moral majority, which itself led to the early 90s PC craze. And it was saying that, you know, a majority of people in this country find swear words and nudity offensive. And, you know, they were pushing for cultural and social puritanism every which way they could, all the while at the same time saying that they were victims because they couldn't, you know, then that evolved into the creation versus evolution thing. It's always victimization, blame and shame, present yourself as representing something bigger than you are. And then at that point, you just have to make sure that you're convincing the right people in the right places of power, be they the deans of colleges or the heads of networks, and you're good to go. And in a way, I got to tip my hat because it's masterfully played.
Yeah, and you have to imagine that if these people really were oppressed, then there's no way that their wants and desires and their whims would be outweighing Disney profit margins. I mean, that's how much power these people have.
True enough. Comment in chat a little while ago that I wanted to address. Oh, nomadic chaos. The only thing social justice haven't affected is DC Comics. The point that I've been trying to make in this stream is that it doesn't matter if DC Comics are social justice warrior, or social justice infected. The problem is the underlying current of we must do something to move forward. We cannot stand still. We must try to get better. Means that they will eventually go that route also, or they will be stagnant.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and one of the things that bothers me about the constant conversation about social justice too is I am a very progressive guy, but my progressively minded direction is towards like research and technology, human advancement, that sort of thing. Whereas I tend to get stuck into this rut of social justice, and it's like the most inconsequential shit that everybody's constantly battling over. And you're right, it's never enough. There's always something next. There's always something next, and it's such a waste of fucking energy.
Well, more than
that's the point. We all want to move forward. Oh, sorry, Nick.
No, I was gonna add to that. I mean, this is a term I mentioned to AJ in conversation the other day, and it does seem in many ways ideologies oftentimes seem to succumb to their own memes in a sense, right? When we talk about progressive social justice constantly needing to have another windmill to tilt at, it's part of it is, you know, the notion of painting to your support base or your little army or whatever, that the enemy is all around you and that they're more powerful than you and that you constantly have to be battling them or else all is lost. Now that's a motivation offered to the foot soldiers, the useful idiots, on behalf by those who are in the academic and media positions to advance this. But it almost does seem like over time that this really does take such root that it becomes a genuine mentality. So you have, I mean, you notice for the longest time it was just everyone's a bigot, everyone's racist. Now everyone is a Nazi. And then you look, I mean, even within our you know, pointless little Twitter spats like the one I saw going on today that Jeff, you were unfortunately having to wade hip deep into. You take little, yeah, you take the Christy Winters or the Chrisiosities or the Kevin Logans or any of them. I mean, sure, Anita makes a really big buck by pointing out how everything in media is the enemy and the enemy is behind all of it, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call it. But when you find these useful idiots, even when they have fucking doctorates, their arguments always consistently and solely break down to you're mean, or you're friends with mean people. You're mean. There's no demonstrable harm until Chrisiosity tries and basically to tie the word cunt to genocide. But that is such a leap that you would have to be functionally fucking retarded to buy into it.
It's worse that they're mean. We're evil.
Yeah. Well, mean and evil are the same thing. Let's be honest with them.
To a certain degree.
And not only that, but when you go back to, oh, everything is evil, even the people who are trying to pander to Anita Sarkeesian are still evil to her because, well, you didn't pander quite the right way. Like, you could have done a little bit more. And if you could just take the lettuce off of this, that'd be great. It's ridiculous because, like we've been saying, every step forward, it's like, well, you could have done a little bit better, right?
Mm-hmm. I swear to God, I'm just so amused by everything. Today is very much amusing me.
Well, you know, right here, actually in the chat there, you know, Sarah Jessica Farter says they see themselves as soldiers in a war, hence social justice warriors. Yeah. Well, this is, I mean, like, and I kind of got to blame Sargon because he picked it up and ran with it. But this notion of an ongoing culture war, though there's elements of truth to it, and you can't deny that there's conflict and there's a lot on the line. Feeding into that really does feed their delusions that they're like, you know, righteous crusaders in this epic struggle between good and evil. And that if they don't win, all is lost and we'll have slavery again and women will be chattel and we'll shave their heads like Natalie Portman and kick them in, like shoot them in back of the chemical shed and that kind of shit. It's, you know, they genuinely believe this shit. And for every ounce of the sort of hostility that they expect that they get, when it stops being about, okay, you can scream and kick and whine, you impetulant little child, and when you're done, I'll explain why you're wrong. When it does break down, and I've done it myself, when we devolve into that point, when we actually just are like gonna just feed into their little trollish horse shit, they walk away from it, even if they look like fools in public, they walk away from it so emboldened because they've been reminded that they are in fact just warriors in the fight for, you know, a progressive, tolerant future, where every ounce of tolerance is enforced at the tip of a bayonet, effectively.
True.
Yeah, you're right. And you know, and kind of in a way, us responding to them every time that they perceive themselves as being the target of a troll campaign or of a harassment campaign, that's just another way for them to be martyrs.
Yeah, there's nothing more marketable in this world than persecution. And everybody does it, especially identity politics, especially. But I mean, you know, some of the most effective moments in religious history or even just cultural history, civic history, are moments where people felt extremely persecuted. And then you have people who, somebody says, pour my glass. I'm teleporting my shot through the camera to you, my friend. But you have social justice warriors who will rally up behind persecution, even if they don't even belong to the group that they perceive as being persecuted. They just rally up behind it. And on top of that, you have other people like the alt-right who intentionally go as inflammatory as possible so people won't like them, so they can milk that persecution. CNN just started saying there's violence against journalists because of a Trump tweet. Persecution complex. Persecution.
Well, even like with me personally, I made a response video in April to a girl who was talking about writing, and she immediately after it happened wanted my video taken down and all that kind of stuff. And I guess she spun the narrative so well, she ended up writing an article about me in Teen Vogue, which was exciting for me. But she was talking about how she was persecuted and harassed, and it was awful for her. And I'm like, if you were to look at your Twitter feed, all you're getting is people talking about how amazing you are, and you're being acknowledged by the mainstream media. I mean, you are the farthest thing from being culturally persecuted that you can get, but there's still a narrative around it.
I think a lot of that was, I mean, there's an intrinsic sort of aspect to human, to a healthy human psychology, it seems, which it makes the appearance of a bully something that we shun and resent. There's no honor in, a heavyweight champion taking on an amateur welterweight. Everyone knows this, and you can see it. And even if you don't like the person who's being bullied, when you see it and it's obvious and it's really happening, there's a reaction within most people that finds it revolting. Now, when you look at feminism, and it really does seem, social justice itself is effectively just the new version, the new evolution of intersectional feminism. And within that, if you look at the arguments that happen right now, there is no way in hell you could say that MRAs, for all their flaws and, benefits, whatever it might be, there's no way you can imagine and say with any sense of credit that they have any kind of power at all. And yet,
No.
And yet, if you ask feminists who have the backing of multi-million-dollar media companies, multi-million-dollar think tanks, whole schools of academia, and senators and congresspeople who identify as being part of what is effectively a fucking cult, they turn around and say that they're the underdogs here, and that's why they need to silence and deplatform this minority voice who simply has a different opinion.
Yeah, because somehow, somebody who has a literary agent and is partnered with Teen Vogue is the person at the disadvantage. It doesn't make sense when you actually break it down, because you're right, they do have these huge backings. And I'm not, and I don't think that makes their arguments any more credible or ours any less credible, but the establishment, if you will, does back them, but we're expected to just pretend like that's not actually happening.
Well, when your ideological narrative is predicated almost entirely on the notion that you're weak and you're powerless, or that you're speaking so that you are the champion for the weak and the powerless, then there's no way in which they can actually admit that they have power. Because just as when it comes back to the core point that we started off at, about it needing to continue going, because this is about accumulating power, because they have found what is sadly a very, very effective means, a very effective game to play to get the kind of power that they want, then admitting something as obviously true as the fact that they are the Goliath in this sense. They are the big, strong power, and that the status quo has already been set by them, and that what they are in fact doing is defending the powerful status quo from minority voices who have dissenting opinions. That takes the wind clean out of their sails. That's suddenly discovering that the great and powerful Oz is just a douchebag behind a curtain.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, also no one wants to be the bully. You also have to remember they have to tell themselves these sort of things, a lot of these people. I still think a lot of social justice warriors, to actually do the things they do, have to actually believe in them being the victim, because otherwise they would have to admit to being the bad guy.
Let's be honest though. The only time a lot of these people end up coming across genuine opposition is when it's pointed out to them by their thought leaders, as it was, as you know, as with vilification and demonization. So that's their first exposure to thoughts that are outside of the realm of their own accepted ideology and philosophy, come by way of people really just pointing to them and saying, this is how awful it is outside. This is it's I can't even think of the analogy there, or not the analogy, but the old story. But it's basically, I mean, it's almost like that M. Night Shyamalan movie, right? The Village. Yeah, it's a bit like that. It's this notion that, like, listen, you can't stray too far. You have to stay where we are. This is the only way things can be done, the only way it'll work. And everything outside is wicked and evil and awful. And then they even do create boogeymen to keep everyone in line.
Oh, yeah, they do.
And you notice, and here's an interesting thing. We'll keep it in YouTube culture for a moment here, right? Let's consider the turncoats of the day, right? I mean, aside from the fact that Ian Miles, aside from the fact that Ian Miles Chong is like now really starting to catch the shit for his treason. So we've got Lacey, and she's catching undue amounts of shit for things she's saying which aren't that fucking. They're not they're not hysterical. They're not inflammatory. It just fails to support the narrative. Then you take the other one. Then we consider let's consider Sherritt and the other one who's not. I won't mention her fucking name, but you consider their flip. Lacey and Ian saw a different way of thinking. They saw flaws in the ideologies that they had been holding close to their chest for so long. They explored it, and they came out to different conclusions on their own. Whereas these others, this sudden turnabout. Every turnabout that tends to go towards the social justice side is always some sort of personal thing. It's some personal vendetta of one kind or another that drives them out away from the crowd that they thought was their established family or community, and right into the arms of the people that they can find the first obvious enemy of them, so that they can just join a new series of ranks and carry on their own sort of fight for what are personal reasons.
Instead of conviction, it's done out of personal grief and spite. Yeah. It's total spite.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. I mean, but I understand how these things happen. I really do. Having through my years had moments where I was involved in a group of people, and I was unceremoniously ejected. And usually I was ejected because I was holding true to my convictions, and they'd clashed, but I was thrown out in a state of emotional compromise. I did find myself agreeing with people that otherwise I would have found distasteful just because I was hurt. So like, I understand it, but it's not the same thing. It's very, very different from what people like, Ian Miles Chong and Lacey did.
Yeah. Well,
what's interesting, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, well, like, I mean, here's the thing, like, Dave, I was probably the last person to more or less say, all right, I'm done trying to help you. I'm done being kind, and I'm done putting up with this shit. Even like, it was funny because people were coming to me saying, oh, did you know he's talking this and that shit behind your back and all this? And all I was doing, it was just like, I wasn't mad. I was just disappointed because I'd tried to help him out. But these, people like this have my sympathy and understanding, but they will not have my charity because they have abandoned conviction. It's not even a personal matter as much as it's a clear abandonment of conviction, and it's an acting out of base, puerile emotions, which really do betray any sense of, intellectual credibility that they had been hoping to establish beforehand. Because let's be honest, we don't all like each other because we're all fans of fucking Supernatural or shit like that. We speak with each other. We become friends with each other because we respect each other's intellects, and we have good times talking with each other.
Well, the thing that's interesting, especially about the Lacey case, is you can really see that there's a good reason for these people not to talk to us, essentially. And you can really see it in the case with Lacey because, look, Bering might be a demon and he might be evil, but Lacey, holy shit, as a turncoat, she's Hitler, she's the devil, she is everything that's wrong with the human race all wrapped into one, because she, you know, even though she doesn't necessarily agree with almost anything that we say, she's still evil because, well, I mean, she played Quiplash with Jeff, and that is that is such a huge sin. Not even to agree with us, but to talk to us. And she's worse than we are because she jumped ship. And so I can see why they're scared to talk to us, because the penalty for talking to us is much worse than just being us in the first place.
Okay, real quick, trumpeting nonsense. Your comment is specifically and perfectly the exact type of simple-minded horse shit I've been talking about.
Read it out, because I have something to say about it too.
Lacey's last stream was 100% blue pill. Yeah. To pretend her big conversion was anything more than orchestrated marketing tactic is to be a willing participant in the deception. Listen, pal, do you want to know who I have loyalty to? My friends, my actual friends, and myself. And that's it. I'm not fighting a culture war here. There are more than just two sides, but there are endless series of factions, all with their own interests, all vying for different shit. And then there are a handful of people who are just trying to make sense of it, trying to make their way through it, and trying not to get caught up in ideological bandwagon bullshit like that. Now, if you want to talk about marketing tactic, you can go the fuck over to Red Pill Coach, and you can, wank off to his, home productions after he uses that after his fucking post-divorce money in his little fucking studio or whatever the fuck he's got. But the end of the day, there is no genuine fucking real big money market here. If there was those media companies who granted they're behind the curve, but if there was, they'd have picked this shit up a long time ago. What we're seeing is we're seeing cultural sea change that's nothing new. We saw a moral majority lead into PC bullshit from the 80s into the 90s. That leveled out when edgy sort of darker shit. I mean, take comics, for example. Dark Horse Comics, when they said, fuck the comic codes label, we're just going to print and publish what we want. They came out under mountains of scrutiny because the moral puritanism of both the religious right and the progressive left came down on them like a hammer, and that only drove that shit harder. This is what we're seeing.
So and something else that I want to mention too, and it's kind of important to understand like the back end side of that YouTube. It was kind of a debate, but it was more just like dialogues and discussions. The very first person that Lacey invited was Blair White, and Blair was supposed to go on first to give the, I guess you'd say, and I hate these fucking terms more, red-pilled perspective on this, my dude. But she canceled. She canceled like an hour before the fucking thing was supposed to go on, and there was no way to replace her. I offered if she didn't want if she wanted to have all girl panel. I said go get Roaming Millennial. I can go grab her right now. I'm pretty sure she's available. But she said specifically the reason that she wanted Blair was because the topic was specifically about feminism and transgenderism. So she wanted Blair because Blair is transgendered. She wanted Megan Murphy because Megan Murphy is a TERF, and she wanted Contra because Contra is non-binary, the progressive feminism. So I'll agree that on the surface it may seem like the whole thing was kind of blue-pilled, whatever that's supposed to mean, but that was a byproduct of somebody canceling on us and not being able to have somebody to replace that we really needed to. We're basically now making a list, me and Lacey are, of feminist critics of feminism who are trans that can be stand-ins if for some reason Blair can't do that again. I don't know when the topic of transgenderism is going to come up in those interviews, but like you have to understand, if you are always looking for the cracks to show, you'll find them no matter what, whether they're legit or not. And just like the fact that the biggest feminist YouTuber on the planet picked me up from the airport for VidCon does not in some way mean that suddenly the biggest feminist YouTuber agrees with me or I agree with her. It means we're friends. and that we can have respect for each other.
Oh my God, Jeff, are you saying that you can be friends with somebody you disagree with? Sacrilege.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Exactly.
I'm shocked to the core.
I hang out in private with fucking Tim, Demotivator Opinion, Kevin Logan, and sometimes even Michael Rollins. Like, we talk in private and we just goof off and hang out. But the only way we do that, we don't talk about social justice when we hang out. That's how we do it.
May I ask a question about Lacey? This wasn't...
Yeah, please.
I might have missed something. Everyone knows I'm a bit on the sidelines of this whole community. Watch Jeff kill me. But have Lacey ever, in any way... I've seen this argument before that came up. Has Lacey ever indicated in any way that she is basically becoming red-pilled? Because all I've ever seen for her is that she basically just said, I want to talk. That's all I ever saw. So I never assumed that she suddenly had become a skeptic, a rationalist, a whatever.
Well, that's just it. You didn't assume, but a lot of people have assumed.
So,
yeah. The other thing...
If she seems blue-pilled, I'm not really surprised because I've never really assumed that she changed her stances terribly much.
In the video where she was like, I want to talk, she literally said, I'm still a feminist. All of this matters to me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, but here's the thing. Christina Hoff Sommers is a Democrat and a feminist. And when she decided to throw her lot in with the garbage people at the time we were just called shitlords as she did, was that just a clever marketing strategy on her part?
Well, obviously.
I'm pretty sure bitch media could probably pay her better than AEI could for that.
The other thing that I find interesting about the blue-pilled, red-pilled, purple, whatever pills that all the drugs everybody's apparently on in the ideological world is that I see this from, I guess, the red-pilled side of things, where if something is blue pill or purple pill, like, you're not allowed to listen to or to talk to. I'm just like, what are you so afraid of? Are you afraid that if you listen to Lacey Green talk about feminism, you're going to catch it? I mean, if your arguments are better, then whether it's blue pilled or red pilled shouldn't be an issue.
Not only that, I mean, fraternizing and being friendly with people who you fundamentally disagree with. It's for one thing, if you've been in politics or you enjoy politics and you enjoy talking about it, those are usually your favorite conversations. Those are usually your good friends because you never run out of shit to talk about. It fucking blew my mind though. I mean, I've seen this on Twitter a bunch too, to see a whole bunch of people who've spent the last several years denouncing echo chambers, right? Then insisting that we make our own, because I'm as liberal as I ever was, and I find Rebel Media to be a fucking joke. I think it's a shit outlet. They block people when they're challenged on their to back up claims or to verify information that they do. It's a joke. Now, when I make fun of Rebel Media and then I'm friendly and casual with somebody who is even a social justice progressive, all of a sudden, the same people who were bitching endlessly about echo chambers can't wait to insist that I work to help establish one for us.
That doesn't make any sense. I actually liked Rebel Media for a while, until somebody pointed out to me. Somebody pointed out that, no, I know, it's okay.
You saw it. No, you saw on Doom's comment there.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, everyone who disagrees with me is a marketing genius. Yeah, until somebody pointed out to me that they were blocking people left and right that disagreed with them, and I really looked into their journalistic practices. I was a fan of theirs, and like you said, I'm conservative, and I've said I don't like Rebel Media, and people are like, "Oh, so you're liberal now?" I'm like, that's not what I said. I can criticize my own side. Thank you very much. I mean, how else do you keep your own side intellectually honest?
Undoom says, everyone who disagrees with me is a marketing genius.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
Yeah, I love you, Undoomed. Yeah, I don't know, man. There's such a strange lack of self-awareness in a lot of this kind of shit. One of the things that I've been dealing with all day is like the concept of bullying. I mean, if you're iDubbbz, you'll just outright come out and say, I love to bully people, blah, 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 blah. But when you have very socially progressively minded people, they will see bullying everywhere, but then you'll have their friends do something like pull up a random person's picture who happens to be wearing a Kekistan flag t-shirt and then be like, the blah blah blah, look at this virgin, effectively. Oh no, that's not bullying. Bullying a random person who's not a public figure and their fucking picture of them proud of their Kekistan t-shirt, that's fine because fuck Kekistan, right? And you're like, what the fuck is wrong with you people? If I went and bullied somebody because they adhered to a fun little pranky group, they would call me fucking Hitler. What the fuck is wrong with people? This is so bizarre. I don't understand.
It's, I mean, it's, I think the only thing that they're missing in many cases is the, is backing up. Oh, it's just a meme. It's just bants. And it's like, oh, well, that's just, they don't understand casual bants like that. And to them, it is genuinely vindictive. And that's the problem. There's this sort of thing. It works much like, it's like religion. It's like ideology. And the more I go, the harder I try, the harder it is for me to really see a whole load of differences between these, right? Because they universally find ends always justify the means. They can justify doing anything in the name of advancing the cause, right? And it's just fucking. It's like, they play out the same exact way. The only difference is that the Ethereum, the ethereal threats and saintly saviors, they just take different forms.
Yeah, and back to Jeff's point of bullying, we as the evil people can't be bullied because we're inherently evil and awful.
It's like white people can't be you can't be racist to white people.
Right. So they think that bullying is wrong. And I really think that they genuinely think that, but because it's somebody who disagrees with them, it's literally not bullying. It's just the right thing to do. It's the justified thing to do. Because otherwise you would just have to think that everybody on that side is absolutely a horrible person. And I don't necessarily think that that's true.
Yeah. I'd agree.
Nick brought up the whole religion thing, and that has been mentioned a ton of times. But that right there, as you said, of course, anyone in a religion who attacks other people are not seeing themselves as bullies because the other guys are not agreeing with them.
I would really like to, and I wouldn't be surprised.
From sheer state of fact.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they're not already out there, but I'd really like to see, what is it, an MRI that measures the brain activity. I'd like to see MRI imaging of a comparison between people who are reciting religious text or, genuinely religious people who are engaging in religious text or espousing religious opinion, and compare that to somebody like, let's say, a hardline communist who's maybe reciting Marx in the same way. I would not be surprised, remotely shocked, to find that the same areas of the brain light up. The same sense of the origins within the human mind for righteous indignation, for whatever creates that ability to excuse vile behavior because it's done in the name of the righteous cause.
Yeah, that would be interesting, and it wouldn't surprise me either. Because like I said, I don't think that social justice warriors are awful. I mean, being in these classes and, being taught by these people who have obviously been in academia for years, these aren't mean people. These are, in some ways, some of the nicest people that I've come across. And yet they still hold these values where white people can't be racist, or bullying in certain contexts is absolutely okay. And it's just, you have to wonder how somebody, who is that kind seemingly ends up there.
It's how does it, one of my favorite things I've heard, I'm sure he didn't coin it, but again, Gary Edwards, in his own analysis as a liberal progressive, he even says he's a feminist, although you know, with the modern state of feminism, you'd never believe that, and the feminists certainly don't. But he said that it's important for progressives to remember what the road to hell is paved with, because this was one of the things I realized. There are bad actors, genuinely bad actors, who will spout and espouse utter nonsense just because it enhances their public platform, it enhances their power, it makes them money. But then what we typically call useful idiots, those people do, by and large, genuinely have the best of intentions, but they're just so hypercharged with this new faith, which gives them all of the leeway to be anything that they want. They can be as nasty as they want. They can be as dismissive and derisive and divisive as they want. It's all in the name of the greater good. So it's perfectly okay. And it's funny because even in combating them and arguing with them, it is easy to fall into that trap of really just seeing your opponent, your adversary, as just intrinsically evil, as just hopelessly evil. And there's not even any point. We don't need to come to an understanding with them or show them anything. We just need to destroy them and beat them into the ground and all this other shit, which then again, it leads to all of this. It leads to this conspiracy style bullshit that we're constantly having tossed around. If you can, you're friends with a social justice type, well then that's makes you a suspicious character. And oh please, give me a fucking give me an reading and tell me how my thetans are doing at this point. It's insipid cult-like behavior, and it goes all over the place. And it seems that the worse one side gets, unless it can remember to check itself, the other side will do the same. And given that, like, at least from my perspective and the people that I associate and remain friends with, we respect sound logic, and we respect good argument, and we respect calm, mature discourse. And it's so easy to devolve. I've done it myself, and it's somewhat to my shame.
Yeah, it is.
Basic humanity. That's basic humanity.
Yeah, and you can see it on the right, with the red pilled. Oh, you can't talk to Lacey because she's not actually red pilled. It's like she never said that she was. She just wants to talk. And don't we want to talk? Haven't we been begging to talk to people for years?
And who the fuck requires everybody to get fucking red pilled to begin with? Like, I don't want everybody to agree with me. That would be boring as shit. Holy God. What would you talk about? Like,
it's a stale meme. It's a stale meme.
Super stale. So stale. I
fucking used. I mean, like, the first place, I mean, I might be wrong about this, but the first place I really ever saw it coming up was when it came to, like, the MRAs. And that was largely and almost exclusively because in order to get your average liberally minded, and you can even be conservative, but in many instances in the West here, you're still liberal in terms of your views of democracy typically. But to get an average rationally minded person in this day and age to actually ask themselves whether or not feminism is a good thing, that is a very uncomfortable truth that a lot of people have to come around to. And, so it kind of made sense in that context, but it's like any other meme. It seems like people just picked it up and ran with it. And now effectively, like, according to some people, you're not red-pilled unless you're like an asexual fucking MGTOW who, would vote Richard Spencer into office only on the promise that he'd execute anyone that gets past the electrified border wall with his laser monkeys. How far do you go?
Well, if he could present laser monkeys, I'd probably vote for him.
Yeah, that would be kind of hard. Like, real laser monkeys, and this isn't some bullshit you're really gonna give them to me? Okay.
Yeah, I could go for laser monkeys, even if it meant going for MGTOWs too. I can live with that.
Yeah, you just have to convince them to go for you. Just be like, I promise, there's a penis down there. Just keep looking.
Angry MGTOW here. Dumb American fox monkeys. My God, I gotta thank you. I gotta thank you, America, though, for that whole Angry MGTOW situation, though, because I swear to God, one of the funniest and most fun moments of my life, and also the single most profitable point in my life, was that live stream that I ended up doing because of all the shit that he pulled off. It was insane. It was absolutely
it was really funny because I announced it on Twitter and you were like, if shit goes crazy, can I have the link? And I was like, I'm not going to do it right off the bat because I want to be respectful. And then he was like, you have AIDS. And I was like, Jeff,
Yeah.
Have fun.
Woo, shit, man. That was so much fun. Oh my God. I hate,
Yeah, no,
I do hate,
and
I
made
hate,
it perfect.
yeah, it ended up being really fun. I do hate that some of my most fun that I have online relies upon somebody being an absolute wingnut and like live streaming the whole thing, like blah blah blam, here you go, you know. But goddamn, when it works, whew, it works. It works so good. It's so
Real
fun.
Quick, and I'm pretty sure I'm like knee deep in Poe territory here. So this is the last comment I'm going to make to this guy.
Okay.
Hostility and rage when you question Lacey's motives. Listen, my thing. I'm not here exclusively to fight feminism or social justice. Exclusively anything. I exist. My opposition in this world, my hostility, if you will, comes when I'm presented with dog shit ideas. And dog shit ideas come in. It's like Baskin Robbins. They come in all kinds of flavors. And this was just the flavor du jour at the moment. And now while I'm happy to mock this sort of red pill coach bullshit, at the same time I'm doing that in the middle of a stream in which we're actually deconstructing and unpacking social justice horseshit. So you're welcome. You know, you can catch up someday, but I won't hold my breath.
Well, the other thing is that he's accusing us of hostility, and I don't think any of us.
No, I'm hostile. I'm hostile to shit ideas. No, I am openly hostile to shitty ideas, and no matter what form or flavor they present themselves in. So if there's hostility being picked up, that's where it comes from. You say something dumb, you know, it's that classic adage: play stupid games, win stupid prizes. And mic drop.
Yeah. I think we're pretty good. I think we got this topic ironed out pretty good so far. Is there anything else that anybody wanted to add into it?
No, not really.
Okay.
Like
cool.
I said, I think I said my piece in the beginning.
I'd like to leave on this note. I think as weird as shit continues to get, I'm ultimately not entirely worried, right? Maybe this is like some kind of weird optimism within me, but I actually do believe that the majority of people are they're not retarded, right? They're not entirely retarded, and that it does make sense why social justice and feminism has been as effective as it has been, because on the surface it looks like a very noble series of ideas the way it's presented, but as people go along and then they see the net effects of what that ideology leads to when it's allowed to run to its extreme, they're starting to turn against it now. I mean, you see like Marvel seeing sales drop off, Doctor Who, which we didn't really get into, but you can tell if you look at like the ratings for each season, the ones where the messaging got really heavy-handed and overtook story, those are the worst seasons. People aren't stupid, and it does take them a little bit to come around to realizing there's a problem with an idea, but they do eventually. They do eventually turn around and reject it, because most people, they don't like authoritarianism, they don't like sexism or racism or any kind of bigotry, no matter what its window dressing might be. And I think I think that we're gonna start seeing the actual fall of this ideology in terms of it being a social and political powerhouse very soon. And I think that the next fight, which is coming up on the horizon, is going to play out much the same, although maybe a little faster, because if there's one thing we notice, that's especially with information, especially with our communications abilities these days, these arguments and discussions, they move a lot faster. And so It really just takes opposition to a bad idea to become mimetic for that idea to start to fall apart.
I'm with you there. I think that good ideas will win out at the end of the day.
Damn right. All right, so we'll call it there. I got one super. I didn't even realize anybody super chatted, but somebody did. Nefarious Demology, loved the discourse. This is why I subbed. Thank you so much. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for taking the time. Sit down with us as we have our casual little chat, as it were. Somebody wants to go outside and play, so I'm gonna go make sure that happens. Thanks for everybody watching live, everybody who's watching in the future. Have yourselves a fantastic day. Say bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Oh, that's clever.